The snow swallowed the sound of boots, but not the blood. This is a scene from a story I am writing about two boys who escaped a brutal Tennessee prison camp only to get lost in the snow. A few things inspired me to write this story. One was the recent discovery of a mass grave from a former Tennessee prison camp, where hundreds of people were murdered and buried. Another was my own experience. Growing up in a cold climate, there was always snow, lots of it, and we'd spend hours outside playing. We built forts, had snowball fights, and made snow angels. But one year, a blizzard hit our town and everything changed. My brother and I were out in that snow and we got lost. We were only out for a few minutes, but in that snow it felt like hours. We were scared and cold and wet, and the snow just kept falling. That experience really inspired me to write this story. Okay, let's get back to work. As Jack pulled the sled, he could feel the weight of Eli's body pressing into him, a reminder of the responsibility he now carried. Every instinct in his being screamed at him to turn back, to find shelter, maybe a farmhouse, someplace where they could wait out the storm. But the thought of reaching the fort, even if only in his dreams, spurred him on. He imagined the hot drinks, the dry clothes, the promise of safety. It was a fragile hope, like a candle flame in the wind, but it was all he had. Eli stirred on the sled, his breath misting in the air. "How much farther?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Almost there," Jack lied, forcing his voice to stay steady. He could feel his own exhaustion seeping into his bones, the cold seeping into his soul. But he pushed on, step by dragging step, not daring to look back, not daring to hope that the end was near. But as the minutes stretched into hours and the sun began its slow descent, he knew they had to stop. He found a fallen log and helped Eli slide off the sled. Then, gathering the branches, he made a small fire. They huddled together for warmth, their breaths mingling in the frosty air. Eli looked at him, his eyes wide and trusting. "Will we make it, Jack?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jack hesitated, torn between the need to protect Eli and the harsh reality of their situation. "I don't know, Eli," he finally whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "but I'll do everything I can to get you to safety." He wrapped his arm around the boy's shoulder, pulling him close. In the flickering firelight, their faces were pale, etched with exhaustion and fear, two small figures battling the relentless cold of the night. So when Eli had first gone down, he'd landed face first in the snow. Boy coughed up blood. Then he'd stopped breathing. Jack had smacked him on the back, rolled him onto his side, started mouth to nose, and just as he was about to give up, Eli had spit out a mouthful of snow and gasped for air. He was alive, weak, but alive. So, they'd made a plan. Jack would take Eli to safety. That meant getting to Fort Trask, the nearest jail, the nearest hospital. He'd been an idiot to take this shortcut. He should have stuck to the main trail. But he'd figured they'd make better time through the trees, and he'd been wrong. Now they were lost. And to add insult to injury, the sled had flipped and smashed the bottle containing the last of their whiskey. But then something else had happened. Something that made Jack wonder if maybe, just maybe, they weren't completely screwed. As he struggled to get Eli onto the sled, the man had appeared out of nowhere. Really, Jack had seen the movement in the corner of his eye, a dark shape against the swirling snow, and he'd assumed it was one of the soldiers. Or maybe it was a wolf, a bear. Anything could be out here, but it hadn't attacked. Instead, the man had walked right up to them and without a word, dropped to his knees beside Eli and started performing mouth-to-nose recital. And now the man was standing, dusting off his buckskins, preparing to disappear back into the forest. Jack couldn't let him do that. He stepped forward. "Wait," he said, raising a hand. "I don't want trouble," he added quickly, realizing that his outstretched hand might look aggressive. "But the boy, he's dying. We need help." The man paused, then nodded once, slowly, and disappeared into the trees. Jack felt his heart sink. Was he making a mistake? Was this guy gonna lead them to more soldiers, more danger? Maybe. But he had no choice. If he didn't try, Eli would die. And as Jack looked back at the boy's pale, lifeless form slumped against the sled, he knew that he couldn't just keep trudging through the snow, couldn't just wait for a rescue. He had to do something. He hauled the sled over the rise and into the deepening shadows. He knew he was close to the ravine because the wind shifted, became colder, more desolate. And then he saw it, the trees ending abruptly at the edge of the world. Below, a dark abyss yawned beneath them. No bottom. Jack swallowed, fear constricting his throat. There was nothing below but jagged rocks and a frozen wasteland. He remembered what Old Man Hemlock had told him about the ravine, how it sliced across the mountain, a scar of ice and stone left over from the glacier. You could drop a team of oxen into it, Hemlock had said, and they wouldn't make a sound. Damn, they were so close to the fort. He could see the lights twinkling in the distance, hear the faint sounds of a campfire. Rescue was so close. And then Eli would be okay, he could almost taste it. He pushed the sled forward, but his foot caught in a hidden root and he went down hard, smacking into the icy ground. Wind knocked out of him. For a moment, all he could do was gasp, try to get his breath back, and then he turned to check on Eli. The sled had flipped, throwing the boy into the snow. Without thinking, Jack scrambled after him, hands outstretched, and managed to grab the collar of his coat just in time. Eli's eyes fluttered open, lips cracked, face pale as the snow around him. "Stay with me," Jack choked, cradling his head like a child's. "Don't you damn quit on me." But Eli didn't respond. His body was trembling now, weaker than before. Jack ripped off his coat and wrapped it around the boy, exposing his own chest to the cold. The wind bit instantly, needles of frost clawing at his skin, but Jack didn't flinch. This wasn't about comfort, it was about penance. He looked up. Trees thickened ahead, terrain turning steeper. The ravine was close. Fort Trask still miles beyond that. He'd misjudged the trail. Worse, he was down to his last match and nightfall was crashing in like a falling axe. A week ago, they were ambushed by a gang of bandits. Now Jack stumbled through the final stretch, boots torn, one hand frozen stiff and useless. Behind him, Eli lay strapped to the sled, barely breathing, wrapped in every scrap of warmth they had. The forest thinned now, replaced by a barren stretch of wind-beaten plain. On the horizon, faint but unmistakable, a spire of chimney smoke curled into the sky. Fort Trask. Jack dropped to one knee, his vision spun. Blood leaked from cracked lips. His legs no longer felt like part of him, just raw bone and weight. He looked back at Eli, whose face was still waxy, lips turning blue again. Jack clenched his jaw, then forced himself up, dragging the sled forward with the last shreds of willpower. Each step was agony, but giving up was no longer an option. Behind him, Sokka moved silently, limping slightly, one hand pressed to a gash in his side. He hadn't spoken a word in 2 days, not after killing the last bandit with nothing but a stone knife. Jack's knees buckled again, he hit the ground hard. For a long second, he didn't move. Then a sharp whistle cut the Asaka high on a ridge, signaling with urgency. Jack turned. Through the blowing snow, 2 riders approached, cavalry. He reached for the last flare in his belt, shaking, numb fingers failing once, then twice. Finally, he struck it. The flare hissed to life, casting a red glow over the white field. The riders veered toward them. Jack collapsed, clutching Eli's hand as the world blurred. "I got you here," Kitty whispered. "You finished the rest." Then the snow swallowed him whole. The wind tore across the plain, biting at exposed skin, whipping Jack's hair into a frenzy. Beside him, Eli shuddered, eyes squeezed tight against the stinging cold. It had been a long march, 3 days of biting winds and near starvation. The only reprieve, the occasional burst of speed when the sled runners caught a pocket of wind and skimmed effortlessly over the packed snow. But now the wind seemed to mock them, swirling around the sled like a predator toying with its prey before the kill. Jack pushed his numb fingers deeper into his coat, seeking warmth that wasn't there. The forest was a distant memory, a place of towering pines that sheltered and hid. Here out on the open plain, the elements reigned supreme, a white, silent fury that threatened to consume them. The horizon seemed to press in on him, blurring the line between earth and sky. Was it any wonder that men went mad in such places? That even the bravest hearts grew weary and turned back? This was a test of endurance, of will, and Jack knew, with a bone-deep certainty that had nothing to do with the freezing cold, that he might not be strong enough to pass it. Fear, raw and primal, clawed at his throat, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He could turn back. He could let the blizzard take Eli, let it freeze them both and end this torment. The thought flickered, tempting, almost seductive in its promise of release. But then he saw Eli, huddled in the meager shelter of the sled, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. In his brother's trusting eyes, Jack saw the reflection of the dying embers of their father's fire, the fading glow of hope. No, he couldn't turn back. Not now, not when they were so close. He tightened his grip on the sled's rope, knuckles white against the worn leather. As long as he held that rope, as long as he kept moving, they had a chance. The fort had to be close. He could feel it in his bones, smell it on the wind, taste it on his lips. A surge of adrenaline jolted him, chasing away the encroaching darkness. With a grunt, he dug his feet into the snow and pulled, hauling the sled forward. One step, then another. The wind screamed in his ears, the snow stung his face, and the cold bit deep into his bones. But he didn't care, he couldn't care. All that mattered was the rope in his hand, the sled, and the boy strapped to it. They were in this together, brother and brother, until the end. The opening line of this week's episode is, "The first thing Jack felt was heat." So let's jump right into it. We wake up as Jack, our amnesiac protagonist. The first thing we feel is heat. We don't recognize it as we try to sit up, our head pounds. We can feel bandages wrapped around our chest and our right hand is missing 2 fingers. As we try to sit up again, a firm hand pushes us back down. The medic tells us that we need to go slower or we'll rip apart all the stitches he put in. We're very lucky to be alive. He also lets us know that the boy made it. His fever broke last night. He's a tough little bastard. With that bit of good news, we're able to close our eyes and relax, letting the warmth of the fire in the room settle in our bones. A door creaks open and we hear boots tapping across the floor. Someone quietly sits down beside us. We turn our head to see Eli, our younger companion from the snowy court. He looks pale and thinner. He's missing his leg below the knee, but he's alive, and that's all that matters. He offers us a small smile and says, "You look like hell." We laugh, a dry, raspy sound. "You should see the other guy." Eli reaches into his coat and pulls out a battered notebook. He holds it up. "Kept writing," he says, "just in case we didn't make it. Thought someone should know what you did." We shake our head. "I didn't do it for glory." "I know," Eli says softly, "but someone ought to." And with that, he looks over at Sokka, who stands in the open doorway watching us. He has the same blank, hard look on his face that he always does. His arms are crossed like he's barring himself off from the rest of the world. Eli looks back at us and then back at Sokka. "You ever gonna tell me what happened out there? Maybe we whisper someday. But right now, we won't have the strength or maybe the will to recount the events of the massacre in the courtyard from a few days prior. We don't want to remember." We reach out and take the notebook from Eli, tucking it under our arm. It feels natural somehow, like it's always been there. We look out the window as snow falls gentle and slow, blanketing the courtyard in white. It's peaceful now, picturesque even, but we know that underneath that snow are the bodies of those we failed to protect, the villagers who trusted us, who welcomed us into their homes and shared their stories and their lives with us. And in return, we let them down. We failed them. Sokka steps into the room, breaking the quiet. He walks closer, his eyes still betraying nothing. He stops beside our bed, glancing down at the worn notebook under our arm. Finally, he speaks. His voice is gruff and gravelly as the stones in the courtyard. "You saved the village," he says, stating the obvious. "They won't forget." We nod, too afraid to meet his eyes. We played our part. That much is clear. But the truth is, we have no memory of what happened in that courtyard. All we have are these strangers' words and the feeling of their gratitude and the weight of their expectations pressing down on us. We don't deserve their thanks. We don't deserve their trust. We don't deserve their hope. We have nothing. The medic clears his throat from the doorway. "He's right," he says, stepping into the room. "You did good, Sam. Now get some rest. You've got a long walk back to health." And with that, he leaves us alone with Sokka and the boy, Eli. Eli looks up at Sokka, hope flickering in his eyes. "When can I get a new leg?" he asks. The question hangs in the air, heavy with implication. We know that if Eli is asking, that means he wants to leave this place, to leave this war behind. Sokka looks away, his jaw clenched tight. When the war is over, he finally says, his voice betraying nothing. As we watch, Eli drops his gaze, his shoulders slumping slightly. When the war is over, he won't be here anymore. Neither of us will. We'll be too broken to stay. And that realization hits us like a punch to the gut. But there are some things we can't fix. Not with bandages and medicine and good intentions. There are some wounds that run deeper than skin and muscle, some scars that run deeper than flesh. Sometimes the only thing you can do is walk away and hope that someday the memories fade and the nightmares stop. And maybe, just maybe, the story doesn't end there. Maybe there's more to come. What do you think happened in the courtyard? What do you think our character did to save the village? Let me know in the comments below.